Lando Norris just lit up Abu Dhabi in free practice, but the FIA just uncovered something on his car that changes everything. If this new evidence holds up, McLaren's entire weekend strategy could collapse, and Oscar Piastri? He's ready to capitalize big time. Insider radios, irregular telemetry, and one silent move by the FIA. We break it all down, and trust me, it's bigger than anyone expected. If you want the raw truth no one else is telling you and all the drama straight from the paddock, smash that subscribe button so you never miss a single lap. Friday in Abu Dhabi was supposed to be business as usual for McLaren. Lando Norris came out of the garage with confidence, setting the pace in both free practice 1 and 2. The MCL39 looked dialed in. The rear was stable, the front was sharp, and Lando's feedback was all smiles until the FIA stepped in. Just before the session ended, scrutineers were seen entering McLaren's pit box with high-speed compliance sensors and setup diagrams. Something triggered an alert, and the entire paddock noticed. What followed was no ordinary post-session check. FIA engineers specifically pulled data from Norris' rear suspension load sensors and floor deflection systems. Word spread fast across the teams. The FIA had detected an anomaly in how the MCL39 was compressing under high lateral load. That's not a small detail, that's the foundation of how ground effect works. If McLaren had found a way to artificially enhance floor sealing without breaking visible regulations, they may have just stepped over the line. Oscar Piastri, meanwhile, was nowhere near the top. He sat out FP1, handing the car over to a rookie test driver, which always puts a driver a step behind. In FP2, he struggled for grip. Sector 2 was his weak point. His telemetry showed a slower minimum speed in turns 6 and 9 compared to Norris. But Oscar's radio told the real story. Feels different from last weekend. There's something inconsistent in the rear. At first, it looked like he just needed more time. But by the end of the day, that comment carried far more weight. Because when the FIA started comparing car-to-car data, a pattern emerged. Norris McLaren showed highly efficient rotation and minimal rear slip even on used softs. Piastri, with what should have been an identical setup, had to fight the car through every apex. In a team as tightly controlled as McLaren, such a stark difference under the same conditions raised eyebrows. Oscar may not have had the pace on paper, but now, he had the spotlight and the FIA's attention was suddenly a weapon in his favor. In parallel, Norris' radio became strangely quiet in the final laps of FP2. His race engineer stopped giving mid-corner rotation updates and shifted to vague, high-level instructions. Let's box. We've got what we need. That wasn't a tire call, that was a shutdown order. The team knew the data might be under the microscope, and the priority shifted from performance to discretion. Something was clearly being protected, and it was no longer just about finding time. It was about covering tracks. What happens next could completely change McLaren's weekend. If the FIA finds proof that Norris' floor, suspension, or ride height system delivered an illegal aerodynamic benefit, penalties will follow. That could include setup limitations, a park firm breach, or worst-case scenario, a grid penalty. And with Piastri needing every opportunity to take back momentum before the final race of the season, this is a gift he never saw coming. So while Norris had the headlines after FP1 and FP2, it's Piastri who might hold the real advantage now. The investigation is active, the car is under review, and McLaren's internal strategy is already shifting. This isn't just technical, it's psychological. Norris is on the defensive. Piastri is on the hunt. And the title decider just got its first major plot twist. Inside the McLaren garage, what started as a quiet advantage has now turned into a spotlight of scrutiny. The performance gap between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri wasn't just about track conditions or driving style. The telemetry has revealed stark differences in how the MCL39 responded under load. Both cars were running the same basic spec, but only one delivered peak performance. And when both drivers push in identical conditions with wildly different results, the problem isn't behind the wheel, it's in the setup. Piastri's side of the garage began raising internal questions midway through FP2. After switching to soft tires for qualifying simulations, Oscar's lap delta to Norris widened instead of shrinking. His corner exit speeds were consistently lower. He radioed in to say, "There's too much snap on throttle. I'm losing the rear through the traction zones." His engineer, sounding unusually hesitant, offered no real solution. At McLaren, where engineering precision is everything, that kind of vague feedback isn't just odd, it's a red flag. Behind the scenes, whispers began about asymmetric rear suspension settings. Some in the paddock suspect McLaren may have been experimenting with variable heave stiffness, a setup that allows for more aggressive rake under load. This would explain Norris' superior rotation in high-speed corners, while still maintaining stability on exits. The problem? It only seems to be working on one car. That's either a setup optimization, or something deeper the FIA didn't like. The FIA surprise data request after FP2 wasn't random. It came after Norris lap traces showed cornering forces beyond expected baselines. Specifically, in turns 5 through 7, his car maintained minimum speeds typically seen in qualifying, not practice. That triggered their sensors and likely a full data pull from McLaren setup sheets. If something was active on Norris' car that Piastri wasn't using, intentional or not, the investigation just became a lot more serious. McLaren now faces a public relations nightmare. Either they knowingly pushed Norris' setup into gray territory, or their systems allowed one driver to gain unintended advantage over another. Neither scenario looks good. For a team trying to prove they're ready to challenge Red Bull and Mercedes, being accused of internal imbalance or worse, favoritism destroys the unified image they've built all year. And for a young talent like Piastri, this is more than a sporting issue. It's about trust. From Piastri's side, you can feel the pressure mounting. His team knows they need to deliver clarity fast. The Australian hasn't just been chasing tenths, he's been chasing equal footing. And when you're fighting with a car that doesn't behave like the other car next door, confidence collapses. That's why Friday's data matters. It tells the world that Piastri wasn't underperforming, he was being out-engineered. Now, with the FIA involved, he has a chance to reset the board. This is the hidden war inside modern Formula One. Beyond the lap times, it's a battle of setups, sensors, and suspicion. McLaren's internal balance now hangs by a thread, and Piastri knows it. He's not just fighting for Abu Dhabi, he's fighting to make sure he enters 2026 as an equal, not a number 2. And if Friday's evidence is enough to spark a setup reset, then Saturday might be the day the tide finally turns. The pressure inside McLaren's engineering office on Friday night was unlike anything they've faced this season. While most teams were reviewing long-run data and prepping for qualifying simulations, McLaren's technical staff were combing through ride height telemetry, torque curves, and suspension travel traces not for optimization, but for legal defense. When the FIA asks for every microsecond of data from one car and not the other, it's no longer a performance conversation. It's a compliance audit. Sources in the paddock suggest that the primary concern relates to Norris' rear-end stability in mid-corner transitions. In turns 6, 8, and 11, Norris was able to carry aggressive throttle with minimal corrective steering. That would typically suggest either an extremely well-balanced aero map or a rear suspension that adapts dynamically to lateral load, something that, while not illegal outright, flirts with what the technical directive refers to as non-passive compliance. If McLaren's system allows for mechanical flexibility that mimics active suspension, the FIA could view it as manipulation. This isn't the first time a team has been suspected of this. In previous seasons, Red Bull and Mercedes both faced scrutiny for innovative interpretations of passive compliance. But in McLaren's case, the real issue is the asymmetry. Piastri's car didn't exhibit the same behavior despite allegedly running the same spec. That discrepancy is what triggered internal alarms. If two cars under the same spec sheet perform differently, then either the implementation varied, or the system responds differently based on driver input, which opens a Pandora's box of legality. Engineering under pressure can either expose brilliance or recklessness. At McLaren, the spotlight now turns to how far the team is willing to push the gray areas of the regulations. Did they design something within the wording but against the spirit of the rules? Or was this a calculated risk they hoped the FIA wouldn't notice? In either case, the result is the same: FIA inspectors with laptops plugged directly into Norris' car, searching for hidden leverage. From a driver's point of view, this is disruptive. Lando Norris has built a strong season around consistency and qualifying prowess. But even the best driver becomes vulnerable when his car's legality is under review. The uncertainty affects how aggressively he can push in FP3 and qualifying. If the FIA enforces setup changes or mandates a ride height adjustment, it could completely shift his car's balance, and that gives Piastri a golden opportunity to attack on equal footing. Meanwhile, Piastri's engineers are quietly gaining confidence. The longer the investigation goes on, the more likely it is that McLaren will be forced to converge the setups between both cars. That means any edge Norris gained through flexibility or innovation may be neutralized. And for Oscar, who's been the quieter, more methodical of the two all season, a level playing field could be all he needs to finally take control of a weekend McLaren initially had locked down. This moment defines the fine line between genius and controversy in modern Formula One. Engineering innovation is celebrated until it becomes too effective. That's when regulators step in. For McLaren, the next 24 hours aren't just about fighting for pole position. They're about defending their integrity, their competitiveness, and their driver hierarchy. Because one misstep in setup interpretation could turn Norris from favorite into fallout. The ripple effect from Friday's FIA intervention is already being felt across McLaren's race strategy team. Behind closed doors, engineers are re-evaluating every variable that could now define the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And with Lando Norris' car under suspicion, the safest and most logical pivot is emerging fast: double down on Oscar Piastri. McLaren, whether they like it or not, may have to shift their weekend's tactical center from the experienced frontrunner to the young challenger. For McLaren, the calculus is clear. If the FIA mandates setup corrections or imposes restrictions on Norris' car, his qualifying advantage disappears. In that case, trying to protect his race from the front could become a liability. Piastri, by contrast, has had a quieter Friday, which now becomes an asset. His car is clear. His data is clean. And his pace, while muted in the timing sheets, was built on race trim simulation, something that may now matter more than raw one-lap speed. Within McLaren's command center, the data suggests that Piastri's race pace during FP2, once adjusted for fuel load and tire age, was only 0.2 per lap off Norris' best long run. And that was without optimal balance. With time overnight to rebalance the car and possible FIA-enforced adjustments for Lando, the delta could flip entirely. McLaren knows this. That's why the briefings are changing. Because in a scenario where one car is exposed and the other is unburdened, risk management becomes priority one. Piastri's side of the garage has also shown psychological strength throughout the season. He doesn't get flustered by external chaos. While Norris is often animated on team radio, Piastri tends to absorb information and adjust quietly. In a weekend filled with political noise, technical reviews, and media pressure, that mindset becomes a weapon. Stability matters. And Oscar has it in spades right when McLaren needs a calm hand on the wheel. There's also the optics. McLaren has invested in Piastri as their long-term future. If he ends 2025 on a high, especially in a situation where Norris' performance is compromised, it sends a powerful message going into the winter. It reaffirms Oscar as a team leader, not just a junior partner. And in a driver market where influence and momentum matter more than ever, this is the kind of weekend that can shift internal dynamics for good.